We are back on the record at 2:30 p.m.
All right, we're back on the record with the next witness, Felicia Izerbigi. So, Ms. Izerbigi, I am Administrative Judge Martha Russo, and I have been assigned to adjudicate this appeal. You have been asked to provide testimony in the matter of Sylvian Quimo versus the Small Business Administration. While you're testifying here this afternoon, if an objection is raised to a question that you are asked, please don't start your response until I rule on the objection, and I will tell you whether or not to continue with an answer. In addition, please answer all the questions orally and be sure to keep your voice raised so that we can all hear your testimony and we can accurately capture it for the record. I do need to swear you in before you testify, so if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. You may lower your hand. All right, Ms. Izerbigi, would you please state and spell your first and last names?
Okay. My name is Felicia Izerbigi, F-E-L-I-C-I-A. The last name is spelled I for Isaac, Z, zebra, E, Edward, V for Victor, B, boy, I, Isaac, G, go, I, Isaac, E, Edward.
Thank you, ma'am. Are you currently employed by the Small Business Administration?
Yes.
In what position?
In human resources, returning annuitants, so it's a temporary position.
And what was your title again in the temporary position?
Human resource specialist.
And how long have you been serving in that position?
I just came back October of 2021. I worked for the Small Business Administration from 2013 and retired April of 2021.
So prior to your retirement in April, what was your position then?
I was also a human resource specialist.
So were you an HR specialist from 2013 through April 2021?
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, Ms. Quimo.
Thank you, Judge. Hello, Mrs. Izerbigi. I'm sorry, am I saying, I think I messed up. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Izerbigi. I'm going to go ahead and just ask you straight up. What is the process? I'm sorry, but can you please define what your role as a in human resources, basically, what is the difference between the duties of the human resources department compared to the personnel department? I'm having a little bit of an issue understanding what the difference is.
Okay. The human resources is, I don't know if I can differentiate it for you, but I can tell you what I do. I'm the human resource, as a human resource specialist, employee relations, performance management. I work with managers, advising them on action about employee issues. The personnel department does a little bit more. They are responsible for like the hiring and other stuff, but I couldn't give you details of what they do.
Okay, so the personnel department does hiring and everything and some other things, but you're not very familiar with what they do. Can you speak as to what they do as far as hiring and the other duties?
No, I can't, because I don't do any of that positions at all. I'm strictly relations, performance management, and some training.
Okay. In your role as an HR specialist and in employment relations, do you handle things like AWOL determinations? Do you review those at all? Things like that. Like when I say AWOL, yes, I mean, you know what AWOL, like,
yes.
Yes. I know I have
absence without leave.
It's
yes, so I can understand you clearly. AWOL, absence without leave, and yes, I would review those and give advisements to the managers. If they have employee issues, yes, they will call me and they would talk to me about the issues they have and seek advisements, and that's what I do. I give them advisements. The decisions they make are the manager's decisions.
Thank you. And would you also consult with, or would management also consult with you as far as things like team assignments at all, or is that outside of your?
That has nothing to do with me at all. Team assignments are strictly managers. If it's not an action against an employee, or they are thinking of holding an employee accountable for something, I have nothing at all to do with it.
Okay. And do you, you already say that hiring falls under the view of the personnel department, so you as a human resource specialist don't have anything at all to do with hiring, but you do have, I believe that's correct, right? You don't have anything to do with, yes, do you have anything at all to do with hiring?
The hiring is for the Office of Personnel. They do all the reviews. You have to be trained to do that, and ERO is not part of that process.
Okay. But will things like firing somebody be part of the HR office?
Hiring, yes. If it will be part of the Employee Relations Office, yes.
Okay. So I am going to ask you if we can please go to document tab number 37.
Yeah. You said tab 37?
Yes.
I have to pull up the document. Look for another one. 37. Okay.
And we can go to page 25, which you have it.
Kind of rolling up page 25.
Please let me know when you're there.
I'm trying to find the page 25. I saw it 23. Okay, I think I went past 25. I know what I have is, I see 21 or 21, and I'm looking for the 25 on 37. Was it 37?
Yes, it's the document is number 37, and then the page number is we can start at 25, but we're going to go down.
So it's the document is 37, and then the page numbers are in the bottom right-hand corner of every page in really tiny print. And so they're in the format like page 24 of 58, page 25 of 58.
Okay.
And you're looking for page 25 of 58.
Yeah, 37. Okay, I'm saying 18 of 58. Okay, 19. All right, I'm in 25.
Thank you. And if you scroll down, I just wanted to maybe try and refresh your memory. If you scroll down all the way, I mean, you can take your time and scroll down to a few pages. I just want to refresh your memory as to the conversation that you had with some of my managers. And
okay, is there a particular page?
No. I just want to just make sure that you know what the context of what we're going to be talking about, and then I'm going to point out to specific pages as questions. Okay. So, for instance, first of all, I would like to ask you, when was the first time that you heard that anybody in management contacted you about me specifically?
I really can't remember because that was this was in 2020, and I deal with not just PDC. I have other centers that I deal with, so I couldn't tell you the exact time because I can't tell you the specific of the first time they contacted me. Hundreds of employee issues for different centers.
Okay, so these emails, for example, we can go to a specific page. Let's say page 34.
Yeah, let me go to 34.
34.
34, right? Because I'm 27. It's just reloading again. What is it doing? Okay.
If you're on page 34, and you scroll down, there is an email that you sent to Mr. Goodson and Mr. Goodson and Mrs. Konisha Barnes.
Yes.
So it's dated July 24th, 2020.
Yeah.
It says, I'm not sure what the outcome of this was.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I haven't heard a single question yet.
I think she's working up to it, Mr. Upshur. Miss Isbegbigi, I'm sorry, I just mispronounced your name. Isbegbigi, are you on the page that you're being directed to?
I'm on page 34, yes.
Okay, so Ms. Quimo, what's your question?
Okay, so my question is, here in this email, you say that you're asking the managers whether they decide to warn me and not charge me with AWOL. And then you say that on termination, did anyone discuss my non-performance with me? You cannot tell from the documentation that you have more. But question is, based on this email, can you recall whether what was the beginning of this conversation with management?
I cannot recall the beginning of the conversation. Like I said, my role is strictly advisory. And so if they reach out to me and they say, this is the employee issues that we have, it's like, if you look at this email, I'm saying, what was the outcome? What did you guys decide to do with it? Our advisements, and the decision they make is strictly the managers.
Okay, so if you cannot recall, if we move up a little bit, it says that I informed Felicia we were hoping on termination for now. I don't know if it's okay for me to read, but it seems that you were informed that there were plans to terminate me, and then you were informed that they were holding off on termination. So can you explain to us what the process of termination will be generally based on the information that you have right now? Right in front of you, meaning since they were talking about AWOL, and in this it's about it seems to be it seems that there were discussions about my performance and things like that. Can you explain to us what the process is if managers want to terminate somebody?
The managers have, if they want to terminate, they have to look at a lot of things. What I do is what they present to me. I would advise them based on what they have presented to me. What they look at to decide they are going to terminate, I don't make that decision. I don't know what they look at. The only thing I review are what are presented to me and saying, okay, if obviously, if you look at that, it said employee performance. So if you're saying you are terminating on performance, I'm going to ask you questions about how have you addressed this non-performance. But how they come to a decision on when to terminate or on what basis, that's their decision. I have no part in that. When they pull the paperwork together and send it to me, then I can review it and give them an advisement.
Yeah. Can you tell from the emails in this document or in this chain what documents they sent you to review to decide on whether to terminate me or not?
Your Honor, I don't think at this point we have any relevance. The appellant wasn't terminated, and I don't think that's a basis for this hearing.
Ms. Quimo, where do you see the relevance of this?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Judge. I see the relevance in the fact that happened. If you look at the emails, July 24th, right around the time that I was given the AWOL determinations on the 20th and the 21st on that time, and I was doing that that time I was actually appealing the AWOL determinations with those managers. So I believe that it's relevant as to the manager's posture in reviewing my AWOL determinations, and also in the fact that me being assigned to a data entry team for 5 weeks, that what I'm saying is that they wanted to force me out, and that has something to do with the fact that I involuntarily resigned in August. Meaning that even though they could not find a credible reason to terminate me, they put me on the data entry team and gave me AWOL to sort of try and create documentation or create situations that would justify the terminating, and that has something to do with my involuntary resignation.
Okay, I see where you're going with it, Ms. Climo. I think it's kind of a circuitous route to get there. I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway, but if you could just try to ask targeted questions to this witness and keep it moving, I would appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, if you go to page 34, it says, I informed Felicia we were holding on termination for now. Please make sure we cancel employee on performance. I would like to speak as to what type of performance or non-performance would justify a termination, please, Mrs. Isabighi.
That's a determination the managers make, because when employees start, they give them expectations, and so they are going to compare their performance against the expectations. I don't make a determination of what the expectations are or the basis for the being terminated for non-performance. What I'm going to review is, did the employee know they were not performing or meeting expectations? That's all I'm reviewing.
Okay.
The managers make that determination.
I see. Thank you very much. And as far as counseling, what is the requirement that the HR department has on the manager's notification for performance? Meaning that in what form does HR make sure that managers notify the applicant about notify the employee about his or her non-performance?
I mean, what we employee relations will look for is, if you say you are terminating an employee on non-performance, then you should have had conversation with that employee. It should not be a surprise. They should know that they were not performing.
And do those conversations, do they have to be in a certain form, meaning that will managers have to have taken notes about their verbal communications with an employee, or does it have to come in the form of a letter or something like that?
As long as they have a conversation and they can certify the conversation, there is not a specific way that it has to be done. It could be communication, it could be email. You know, there has to just be a communication that the employee knows they are not performing. Be a phone call.
Okay. And those communications, is there a specific number or a specific time frame that this has to be going on before termination is okayed by your department?
Not that I'm aware of that there has to be a specific number.
If you look at page 30, your email says, I'm not sure what the outcome of this was. Did you decide to warn her and not charge her AWOL? Does that mean that you were approached regarding AWOL determinations? Is that something that is fairly that can be induced from this email?
The email is just a question. What did you decide to do? Did you charge her or did you decide to warn her? That's all the email is. Because, like I said, my role is strictly advisory. Once I've advised them, the manager to make the decision. So I follow up on occasion to find out what was the decision that you made.
And the AWOL determinations, would they have something to do? Would they be something that is relevant to an employee being terminated?
AWOL on its own is not a disciplinary action. be grounds for disciplinary action depending on how many awards an employee accumulates.
Okay. Would an employee that accumulates all awards in a short amount of time, saying a couple of weeks or a month, would that be something that could potentially lead to termination?
I cannot say that because every case is different. You have to look at it. There is not a written rule on how many, how little, how much. You have to look at each circumstance. You have to look at each case on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask you about, let's go to tab number 23, please.
Just give me a minute to go back out. 23?
Yes, please.
I have 23. Oh.
23, page 212.
Page
212, 212.
Okay.
Were you able to get there?
I'm still scrolling down to get them. I'll let you know.
Thank you. You know, you can go up to the left where it says
Just
there's
tap
a
for
square. Yes, you can put in the page number there and just type enter, tap enter, and you should get to the
page faster.
Are you there?
I'll let you know as soon as I get there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So page 212 and 213, that's a letter of counseling dated
Action, Your Honor.
July 27, 2020.
Your Honor.
She hasn't asked her question yet, Mr. Upshur. Let her finish her question and then you may object.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please proceed, Ms. Primo.
Thank you, Judge. Mrs. Isabigi, were you able, can you read quickly through the letter and let me know whether you remember seeing that letter or whether it looks familiar to you?
This is a standard letter of counseling that employees receive. So I don't recall this specifically, but that is a standard letter of counseling.
And who have drafted that letter? I mean, I see Mrs. Rivera and Mr. Christopher Martin's names at the bottom, but is it within the purview? Is it within the responsibility of the supervisors to draft this letter, or do they draft this letter with the assistance of HR?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this question also, not only on the basis of relevance, but the witness has already stated that she doesn't recognize a specific letter.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see the relevance of this letter, Ms. Quimo. I'm going to let the witness answer this particular question just to see if is there a standard as to who would draft this type of letter?
The managers could draft it and have it reviewed by the ER.
Okay, thank you. But you don't remember for this specific letter?
Specifically, no.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Quimo.
Thank you very much, Judge. And Mrs. Isabigi, normally would that letter have to be provided to the employee in order to be effective or to be valid or to go into the record?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes. Would this letter, as it's drafted, is it mandatory? Is it part of the procedures at the PDC that this letter has to be provided to the employee in order for it to go on the record?
Yes, the employee has to know about this letter. Though it doesn't really go on the record, it's not a disciplinary letter. It just goes, the employee keeps it in their folder, but they will cover it. Normally, they will cover it to the employee to say, we're giving you a letter of canceling if it is given. Yes.
And did you say that you will go into a folder? What folder would that be?
The managers, they have whatever, it's like you can create your own folder either online, that's for each employee, but that's about it. Nobody else has access to it. It's not part of a disciplinary record. It doesn't go, really anywhere. Okay. It's just putting the employee on notice.
Okay, but that letter will become helpful if later on managers wanted to terminate somebody. Is that correct?
Objection, leading, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, I can't rephrase, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Quimo.
How would that letter become helpful to the managers?
Objection, relevant, Your Honor.
Overruled. You can answer, ma'am.
It just gives a notice to the employee. In other words, if the employee does something else, the employee already knows what is acceptable and is not acceptable, and that will be part of the consideration for a higher level of discipline.
Okay. So would that be a letter that is signed by the employee acknowledging receipt? That will be that you will seek to receive from managers, maybe seeking to terminate somebody, to confirm that they have had counseling with the person?
The counseling letter, we will ask for any documents you have if you have talked to this employee. But a counseling letter usually is not, like I said, it's not a disciplinary action. It's just saying they could have had the same thing as a verbal conversation without putting it in writing. So it's just proof for them, for the managers, that yes, I have put this employee on notice before.
Have you ever had, in your years of working as HR, have you ever had managers reaching out to you and telling you, for example, that they've given 4 AWOLs to somebody in a 2 weeks period?
Probably, I can't tell you specifically. Depending on AWOL is where you don't call in when you are supposed to, within 2 hours of your shift. So the man, give AWOL. So if they have an employee, for example, that even if it's within a week, you're supposed to report at 7 and you're not reporting at 7, you can call in before your start time, 2 hours to your start time. They can give AWOL.
Thank you, Mrs. Izobigi. I was asking whether you've already, in your years as HR, in HR at the SBA, whether whether you've had instances where managers have reached out to you regarding a crisis at work or potentially looking into terminating someone, where they had charged somebody AWOL 4 or more times in a 2 weeks period, meaning like that amount of AWOLs in a short time period. Is that something that you see often?
Something possible. I deal with so many that it's I can't remember how many I deal with on a weekly basis, and from different centers, different managers. I don't support just PDC, so some might even get, some we don't always get. So they can charge if the employee is not following procedure.
Thank you. I understand that. I'm just going to move on. So my next question is regarding I wanted to know whether your department, HR department, I know you work in employment relations, but does that also include like post-employment, any type of post-employment relations or things like that, or would you be able to speak as to those? Basically, what happens when the person leaves?
If for the employee relations, what we do, we give the employees their rights. We make sure they know what their next steps are regarding an adverse action. That's what we do with them. Then we usually will give them, there's an ODSEE, there is a pamphlet that we give them that has information, it has addresses, it has phone numbers that they can use. We just make sure they get their rights, and they know their rights when they're leaving.
Okay, thank you. The emails, that information, does that include any type of post-employment restrictions?
There is the ODA avenues of redress, we call it, that we give to you. And unless it's a termination, there is also that we generally give is rules for the road. That's it. But it has to be when it's a termination.
Okay. So can you go into document number 23, please?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes. I think it's tab number 23. Are we there already?
Tab 23?
Yes, 23. 23. And then page, let's go to page 1. Oh, we're already in page 23. Let's go to page 139, please. Okay. Yes.
What's that? 139.
Yes. It says SBA information notice. Is that where you are also?
I don't see, no, not quite. Is it the seeking non-employment with SBA?
Yes, at the top it says SBA information notice. Yes.
Rules for the
Is
role.
that what you are? Yes. Is that a document you were talking about earlier when you say that you send it to termination to people that have been terminated? Okay. Do you send it to anybody that has not been terminated?
We don't send it directly. The managers will give it to you, and that's the managers that does that. But I know that's part of the document that goes out.
So it's the manager's decision as to whether to send it to somebody.
Right.
So if the letter came from somebody in HR, does that mean that the managers requested that it be sent to that person?
What letter?
If that notice was emailed to somebody by an HR person, does that mean that does that still mean that that person's managers had something to do with the person receiving that notice?
Okay, I don't get the question.
Yes. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to try and rephrase it. You say that the managers are the ones that decide whether to give that notice in cases where there is a termination. My question is, even if the notice was actually sent to the employee by somebody in the HR department, does that mean that the employees managers requested that the letter be sent?
I can't answer that question because I don't know. We normally don't send any letters of termination to employees because we don't make that decision.
Okay.
And if employee reaches back to us and they need information, then we can send them information.
Okay. Okay.
So when the letters are going out, we never ER do not send termination letters to anyone because that's not our decision to make.
Okay. Thank you very much. I believe I have one more question on this document. Okay. If you go to page 237, please, of the same document.
227?
237, 237.
237, okay.
Can you repeat that for me, please? I apologize.
Yes, I'm sorry. 237, 237.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I want to ask you, if you look at this, it's an email that's basically my resignation email because I resigned in August 2022. And if you look at that email, I would like to ask you whether HR will be responsible for providing somebody with a copy of their commitment plan or commitment rating, things like that after they've departed from the agency.
That would be ODP, Office of Personnel. ER would not handle any. Once you resign or you are terminated, if it's not an adverse action, ER is not, employee relations is not involved in any of those.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was I don't have. I think I'm just going to ask you one more question, please. Is it within the purview of the HR department to review somebody's file before promotion, or is it within the purview of the personnel department?
The promotions, if there is a promotion, there is usually is a vacancy announcement that is done, and then everyone goes through the process. Except I don't know much about the hiring and any of that because I do not handle those things.
Thank you. I actually meant like something like team lead promotions or grade increase, like somebody going from DS9 to a DS11.
That's ODP. It's Office of Personnel that does all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not do anything with that.
I think I'm done asking questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Primo. All right, Mr. Upshur.
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, in 2020, about how many employees were responsible for providing support for it?
I think PDC alone had about 4,000, and I also supported the, I was going to FOC West, the Feed Operations West, which is in Sacramento. We have the Feed Operations East, which is in Atlanta, and we also have the Customer Service Center in Buffalo, New York. So the total maybe 6,000 or more. So
6,000. And did you ever directly supervise Ms. Quimo?
I do not know.
Did you ever indirectly supervise Ms. Quimo?
No.
Did you ever make any management decisions regarding Ms. Quimo, such as attendance?
No.
Regarding discipline?
No.
And regarding her AWOL designations, did you ever make any decisions regarding her AWOL designations?
No.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge regarding Ms. Quimo's disclosing SBA rule changes to minority applicants and recommending solutions for them to obtain loans in or around June 2020?
No.
Do you now, or did you ever have any knowledge regarding Ms. Quimo disclosing to her team lead, Jessica McCall, and her supervisor, Christopher Martin, a belief that requiring loan applicants to complete an outdated IRS form and submit it by email posed a risk of a breach of personally identifiable information?
No.
Okay. Did you ever have any knowledge, or do you now have any knowledge regarding Ms. Quimo's supervisor contacting her while she was on sick leave in or around June 24th, 2020?
I don't recall if it was not in the email. I don't recall if they said, not before it was done. If that was part of the paperwork, I can't recall. But calling me to say they are going to reach out to her now.
Okay. And just a few questions from your prior testimony. For attendance, is it possible for attendance at some point to lead to termination if someone's attendance is poor enough?
It could. I'm not aware of terminating someone strictly. Let me put it this way. It could, because if you are not there to do the job still has to be done. So it could, but it could if it's a lot of in attendance, so you are never at work.
Okay. Can there be? I know during your previous testimony, you guys were talking about a letter of counseling. Is it possible for counseling to be given without a letter?
Yes.
Can counseling be given verbally?
Verbally, yes.
And are all counselings going to always have a recording in a file?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and then also, and I just wanted to also check for the rules of the road, the form that you guys were looking at earlier during your testimony. And you said that those are given for people that are terminated?
No, for people that are terminated, we usually recommend that they are given. But if people are resigning, I am not aware that they are giving that.
Okay. All right. Do you handle resignations in your job position?
No.
Okay. And to that same vein, do you have any knowledge regarding Ms. Cuimo's August 15th, 2020 resignation?
No, that she was resigning now. That's handled by Office of Personnel.
Do you have any reason? Do you know why she resigned, or have any background or information about why she resigned?
No.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge regarding the agency refusing to provide Ms. Cuimo a copy of her performance plan or evaluation in August 2020?
No.
Do you have any knowledge regarding the agency imposing restrictive non-disclosure agreements on appellant in August 2020 that were more restrictive than anyone else in the agency?
No.
Do you have any knowledge regarding Ms. Erica Rivera reassigning Ms. Cuimo to a simplistic data entry task?
No.
And can you remind me, do you handle employee assignments?
No, have nothing to do with employee assignments at all.
And are you aware that Ms. Cuimo was charged with AWOL in around July and August of 2020?
I know there was discussion about charging her AWOL. And you see the email that she was saying, I was asking what was the outcome. The decision of whether it's AWOL or not is manager's decision.
Okay. And did you speak with Ms. Cuimo around that time regarding her AWOL designations?
No, I had a communication with her, and she had asked specifically what AWOL was. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if it was via email or we had a phone call, but we had a communication about AWOL.
And you said that she had asked what AWOL was?
Yeah, she asked about AWOL, and I told her it wasn't a disciplinary action, but it could be grounds for disciplinary action.
Okay, but AWOL itself is not a disciplinary action, is that right?
Right.
And to your knowledge, did she ever receive any disciplinary actions in regards to her AWOL designations?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And based on your knowledge and experience, were Ms. Cuimo's AWOL designations legal and appropriate?
I will say yes, if she got one.
And Your Honor, I have no more questions at this time. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Ms. Cuimo, do you have redirect?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you. Mrs. Isabig, I'm going to start with the last question. Did you say that you believe that the AWOL determinations were appropriate? I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Yes, if they are following the rules, if you didn't call in 2 hours before your schedule, the managers have the discretion to charge you.
Are you aware of the circumstances surrounding the AWOL determinations that are received?
The managers make a determination based on individual basis, case by case. So, if you do not call in 2 hours before your schedule, the managers can charge AWOL. And then if you have circumstances, they will review those on a case-by-case basis.
Are you aware of the fact that I received 4 AWOLs in July? I received 4 AWOLs in July 2020. Are you aware of the circumstances surrounding each one of those AWOL determinations?
That's the manager's decision to make now.
Do you recall
what they have?
Sorry for interrupting you. Do you recall what the circumstances surrounding each one of those 4 award determinations was for me specifically?
No.
So would it be appropriate, would it be correct to say that you cannot determine whether those determinations were appropriate at this point, if you don't remember exactly what they were based on?
Yeah. He's asked me based on my experience. It is if you have 2 hours, you don't call into your job 2 hours before your start time, the managers can charge AWOL, and that would be appropriate. They can look at the individual cases and say, okay, because you did this, I'm going to let it go. But if they don't want to listen, if it is 2 hours late and you haven't called 2 hours before your scheduled time, the managers can charge you.
Thank you for clarifying that. What if somebody was 5 minutes late from lunch, after lunch? Would that be sufficient enough to charge them with AWOL in your experience?
I don't make those decisions. That's the manager's decision.
Okay. Regarding, you said also that you were not aware of anybody being terminated strictly because of attendance issues. What other factors besides attendance will go into your assessment of whether it will be appropriate to terminate that person?
Correction, Your Honor. Again, we're not talking about termination here. Also, the witness has stated multiple times that she doesn't make determinations. Management does make determinations. She only advises.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain that. What type of proof that somebody has been canceled would you request from management, or would you require to receive from managers before telling them whether a termination was approved by HR or something like that?
Correction, Your Honor.
Is that a better question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. Did you complete the question? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, what I was asking is a biggie, is whether what documents did she request? Because she said that department in employment relations managers contacted her to review the case against anybody that they wanted to terminate. And my question is, what type of documentation would she need to see from managers before being able to give them the okay to terminate somebody?
Your Honor, and I'm going to object to that because we're still not talking about termination in this hearing.
Sustained.
Okay. What type of documentation, Mrs. Isabigi, would you request to see from managers as far as the letter of counseling that we talked about earlier? Besides that letter, what other documentation or what other proofs would you request from managers in order to okay any disciplinary action or based on attendance or performance or both?
It's going to depend on the disciplinary action. The letter of counseling, you don't need a lot to do a letter of counseling. If the employee is not sitting at their desk when they are supposed to be there, you can do a letter of counseling. So as the disciplinary process progresses at disciplinary level, then you require more to sustain
it. What type of documentation based on your review of the documents that we've looked at regarding your email exchanges with my managers, what type of documentation would you have requested to see in order to approve any disciplinary actions based on the facts that you have right now?
Your Honor, I am going to object. I don't know what disciplinary actions we're talking about, but I don't know that any actual disciplinary actions are even alleged here in this matter, Your Honor.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to sustain that. I think it's speculative, Ms. Quimo.
Okay. Mrs. Itabigi, within your department, when you started working as an HR specialist, I believe you said in 2013, did you always work in the employment relations department?
Excuse me, yes.
Have you ever worked in coordination with other departments within HR?
In coordination with them, yes.
Okay. Are you aware of their processes, the other the processes within the HR department outside of your specific outside of employment relations specifically?
I may know of some of them, but I don't know what they do because I do not do it.
Are you aware of anybody that separated from the agency? In your general knowledge, since 2017, has there been people that separated from the agency and did not receive the notice that we saw earlier? What was the title again? I think Rules for the Road, something like that.
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to relevance, especially for the time frame that we're speaking about, and for the actual document, as well as for the fact that the witness has already testified that she doesn't handle sending out all of those notices to all of these separated employees.
Okay, I would like to respond. Okay, yeah, hold on, Ms. Quimo. If we could have the witness, if you would please just turn to that document, which is at tab 23, page 139, just to make sure we're all referring to the same thing.
I think that was Rules for the Road.
Yes, ma'am. Let me know when you're there, Mrs. MSPB.
Yes, ma'am. $139 or $137?
139.
Okay, I'm there, Judge.
Okay, and I see on this document on its face, it indicates the effective date is June 21st, 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I think if we could limit Ms. Quimo's question, she was asking about individuals who have separated. I'd like to limit it to after that date, June 21st, 2017. And her question was, are you aware of any individuals who separated after that date who did not receive this notice? I'm going to overrule your objection, Mr. Upshur, and you can answer that question if you know the answer, ma'am.
Judge, I wouldn't know the answer because I do not send out that information. That information, this Rules for the Road, it's sent out by the supervisor for the matter. It's not the HR that sends them out. So I can't tell who got it or who did not.
Okay, so it's your understanding that this information is generally sent out by supervisors or managers to the separated employees?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there circumstances where human resources sends out this information to a separated employee?
I'm not aware of any.
Is it your understanding, does the information in this notice apply to all employees, whether or not they're specifically sent the notice? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Quimo, if you can continue.
Thank you, Judge. Mrs. Isobigi, have you ever sent out, have you ever, in your communications with people that had separated from the agency, have you ever encountered somebody that, have you ever known of anybody that did not receive this letter at all? Basically, I'm going to try and rephrase that information, that question. This letter contains on page, if we scroll down to page, I'm looking for the post-employment restrictions specifically.
Is this still about the rules for the road? Or?
Yes, same document. We're going to scroll down to I'm going to scroll down to page 144.
Okay.
At the bottom, it says that a recipient of SBA assistance may not have a former SBA employee as its employee, partner, agent. You can read that paragraph. Are you familiar with that section? Are you familiar?
No, I didn't draft these rules for the road, so no.
Okay. Are you generally aware of that information? Basically, certain SBA employees not being able to be employed by people that have received SBA assistance. Were you aware of that restriction?
No.
Specific? Okay. All right. I think that ends. That concludes my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Upshur, did you have any recross?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Okay.
During your testimony, you were speaking about circumstances regarding not upholding AWOL. Is that right?
Not upholding AWOL.
Mm-hmm. Maybe like I believe it was maybe like excuses or something, so that managers circumstances.
Yes,
If an employee came into work late without prior approval for their absence, and the reason for their lateness was to apply to other jobs outside of their current organization, would that be a reason for management to necessarily have to overturn an AWOL designation?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right, I do appreciate your testimony here this afternoon. Please don't discuss your testimony with anyone who is not now present until this hearing is concluded, which will be sometime tomorrow. You're released and you may exit the meeting. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's go off the record.
We are off the record at 3:40 p.m. We are back on the record at 3:50 p.m.
We have our next witness with us, Rob Goodson. Mr. Goodson, I am Administrative Judge Martha Russo, and I have been assigned to adjudicate this appeal. You have been asked to provide testimony in the matter of Sylvian Quimo versus the Small Business Administration. While you're testifying here this afternoon, please answer all the questions orally and make sure to keep your voice raised so that we can all hear your testimony and accurately capture it for the record. In addition, if an objection is raised to a question during your testimony, please wait for me to rule on the objection before you start your answer, and then I'll tell you whether or not to continue with the response. Before you testify, I do need to swear you in, so if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may lower your hand. Mr. Goodson, would you please state and spell your first and last names?
My first name is actually James, James. Goodson, Goodson. It's a junior.
Thank you, sir. Do you currently work for the Small Business Administration?
Yes, I do.
In what position?
I am the Assistant Center Director over Accounts in the Fort Worth Processing and Disbursement Center.
And how long have you been the Assistant Center Director for Accounts?
I've been the Director over the Accounts Department since, I believe, October of 2013.
All right, Ms. Quimo.
Thank you, Judge. Hello, Mr. Goodson. I saw you a number of times at the PDC, but we finally get to talk to each other. Unfortunately, in these circumstances, I'm going to start by asking you, as the Accounts Department Director, would you be able to tell us roughly how many attorneys did you hire, or did the PDC office hire, did the Accounts Department hire directly or indirectly during the 2020 for the pandemic, for the COVID-19 pandemic?
I don't have those numbers directly in front of me. I know that I can, between the legal assistants, paralegals, and attorneys, I know we hired between 2,100 and 3,200 is how many I supervised.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you exactly how many are attorneys. You'd have to contact personnel.
And of the 2,100 to 2,200 people you supervise, what roles do they have? Besides attorneys, do you have paralegals and what other types of roles do people play within your department?
We have attorneys, paralegals, and legal assistants.
And what
I also have a program support assistant.
Okay. What is the Accounts Department responsible for primarily? And you can narrow it down to this pandemic.
Pardon me, it cut out.
Oh, sorry. What is the Accounts Department specific duty or responsibility within the ODA, within the Office of the Department?
We are responsible for reviewing and approving the original loans and closing and dispersing SBA disaster loans. Pardon me, my light went off there. And a little bit of extra work under the COVID pandemic and the COVID idles. So there was a little bit of different work than we normally do with those.
How different was that work for the idles?
They built a new platform for that, and it was and those loans were approved and dispersed in a different system, so on an accelerated basis. because of the sense of urgency for the disaster.
Since you're the director of the department, how many supervising attorneys do you have under you in the same department?
Currently, I have 8 permanent, and I have, I think another 18 or so that are on temporary, that are in temporary supervisory positions. I'd need to double check the actual number, but
that's fine. Thank you very much. I also want to ask you, during the 2020, between April and August 2020, did you have roughly the same amount of people, of supervising attorneys?
No, we had 8. Plus my deputy, and then we gained others towards the end of the year.
Okay.
Or later in the year.
Thank you. Can I ask you, as a center director, what is your main goal at the PDC?
My main goal?
Yes, well, your main goal, meaning yes, how do you manage as a director? What do you do?
I oversee the operations of the accounts department.
How often do you have meetings with supervisors about attorney supervisors about their work?
At least once a week, but often it's as needed based on whatever we're dealing with. It depends on all the supervisors or individual supervisors. It can be daily, it can be hourly, but at least once a week.
What type of issues do you usually discuss with supervisors during those meetings?
Anything to do with the operations? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to be more specific. Do you discuss things like team assignments?
Pardon me, you're cutting out again.
Yes, I'm sorry. During the meetings that you have with supervisors, do you discuss team assignments as to who goes to what team and things like that, or which teams need to be created and things like that?
We may or we may not. We don't typically get into the deep details of who's going to what team, but we may talk about what teams need to be created and how many people need to go where they go.
And does that mean that supervisors are mostly the ones making the decisions as to who goes to the teams that are being created?
Well, it can be the supervisors with the input of team leads, but it could involve management, the director, or the assistant, my deputy. It just depends on what we have going and what we're talking about.
Who makes the final determinations as to who goes to the team, though? Do you rely on the supervisor's recommendation? What type of data do you
typically it's the supervisors.
Okay.
They'll make recommendations.
What would the role of a team lead be in team assignments? Basically, how will a team lead affect the decision as to who goes to what team, or something like that?
They may give input to the supervisors on who's stronger or weaker, or who has a particular proficiency. or where we really need to shore up certain teams.
Are you involved in any discussion regarding anybody being promoted to a higher grade? For example, if you hire somebody at the GS9 grade, is it within your managerial responsibilities, or is it within the supervisor's responsibilities to determine whether somebody might be eligible to move to a higher grade?
That would be myself and my deputy. The supervisors would provide input, and there's certain qualifications you must meet in terms of the government, but it would not be particularly just a supervisory decision.
What other type of criteria go into determining whether somebody is eligible to move from one grade level to another grade level? And what I mean is, outside of HR, outside of the background, things like the background check. Within your department, what do you look at to make
we look at the requirements of the job, the specifics of the position description, and then what our department policy is in regard to promotions, whether they're discretionary or automatic per HR standards, those types of things. We look at experience, proficiency, and job performance, as well as any
attendance,
as well as any conduct issues.
And when you say any conduct issues, will attendance be part of conduct issues?
It could be.
Does that mean that if somebody, for example, is hired at the DS9 level, for them to move at the DS11 level, you have to look at all those things to determine whether they are eligible to even move to that level? Meaning, is it automatic, or does it require some type of review?
We do an evaluation.
Relevance. Overruled. You can answer, Mr. Goodson.
We do an evaluation.
And is that evaluation, when you do that evaluation, do you keep notes, or is it just orally, or do you just make it orally and then?
There's discussion.
Okay.
There are
discussions. But do you keep notes of those discussions, or do you?
No, there's discussions with supervisors in meetings. We don't necessarily.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Goodson. I'm going to remind both of you, and apparently myself as well, to please be cautious not to speak over each other. Just make sure you each have a chance to finish what you're saying before the other jumps in.
Understood.
My apologies, Mr. Goodson. It's about having a mind. So my question was, what I was trying to get at is, when you make those, when you do those evaluations, do you keep a record of them?
They're usually verbal discussions. There may or there may not be something, I don't know. And they're usually based on input and justifications from supervisors.
If you don't mind, I'm going to ask another question. Is it customary for you to to evaluate employees without keeping any written record at all of the evaluation?
Of what evaluation?
Is your of the performance evaluation of the employees evaluation before making the promotion? Meaning, which one is more common? Keeping a written record of it, or just doing an overall evaluation?
With the number of employees that we have, it is a usually an oral discussion in a supervisor meeting.
Okay. All right. My next question is, did you specifically know about the creation of a triage team that I was part of? I'm going to assume that you're aware of the details of the case and that you reviewed some of the documents that we submitted for this hearing. Were you aware of the creation of the triage team under the leadership of Mrs. Rivera and Mr. Martin?
Yes, we had a triage team in the early part of the disaster.
Okay. Were you aware of what the triage team was, what the duties on the triage team consisted of?
Yes, they were trying to prioritize files so that we could quickly expedite them through the system.
Okay. Were you aware that those were simplistic data entry tasks?
I would not categorize it as that.
Okay. How would you explain in plain language what people on the team were doing?
People were reviewing files to determine how quickly they could be moved through the system. I would have to rely on because the duties changed, I would have to rely on the supervisor to get into the details.
Okay. Were you aware of did you know of who was assigned to that team when the team was created? Did you get a list of the names and the titles and grade levels of the people that were assigned to that team?
There was numerous people assigned to that team. I was supervising so many people, I had to leave most of that to the supervisors.
I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, please, can we look, I'm going to go back a little bit. Can we look at tab number 11, page 335, please?
Hold on. Just 1 second. Somebody's going to have to show me how to get back to that.
Ms. Landry, can you give guidance on how the documents were sent to the witness?
Yes. Mr. Goodson, do you have the email that that was sent to you by Mr. Howell?
Yes, I do. I'm trying to find it. I have so many emails. Just bear with me, please.
Okay.
And you're saying tab number
11.
Okay.
And page number 335.
Just hold 1 second. It's still loading. Is it the PD, the job posting?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So it's the job posting for the attorney advisor position at the SBA, at the PDC office in Fort Worth. And it's from, if you look at the open and closing dates, it was from March 2020 to April 2020. And that's actually the job posting that I applied to. And my question is, if you scroll down, you do recognize this job posting, right? If you scroll down, you can see the description of the attorney position that you were hiring for.
Yes.
Were you involved at all in the requirements and the responsibilities and the duties mentioned in this document?
Yes, those have been our standard duties that we've had for years and years.
Okay. And when you posted, did you confer with personnel, HR, I'm not sure which department is responsible for personnel for hiring? Did you confer to them and did you confirm with them that these duties will apply for the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic before they posted that on USA Jobs?
Yes, they posted it, and it was the standard duties and position description that we've had for many, many years.
And would you please look through this document and point out where you believe that the assignment of an attorney in your department will fit into that, based on your understanding of what the task was on that data entry team? Would you please point out as to where exactly in this document that job description fits into?
On these 2 pages of the job announcement, or in the official position description?
What do you mean the official position?
Well, are you talking about just these 2 pages? Because the job announcement typically is more than just these 2 pages.
Okay. On these 2 pages, do you see anywhere where the data entry team will fit into? I mean, the data entry job duties will fit into. Do you believe that there are more responsibilities on some other pages?
Yes, because typically we lay out most of the basic elements that you would find or do in this job, but we also, because of the dynamic and changing nature of the job, we also have a section in there that talks about other duties as assigned, because our tasks change and vary with the disasters and with the systems and policies that we use and change. And so any of those can call on us to do any task at basically any time that is necessary to get the job done within the Office of Disaster Assistance.
And I believe that you say that, actually, let's go to, let me check something real quick, please, and see whether I'm going to ask you. Sorry, I'm gathering my thoughts. I got lost a little bit there. I was going to ask you, Mr. Goodson, you are an attorney, right?
Yes.
Okay. How long have you been an attorney?
Since 1993.
Okay, a lot longer than I have for sure. How long have you been working at the PDC in general? Did you start your career at the PDC as a director, or did you start somewhere lower?
I started at the PDC. I've spent my entire career here. I was a loan officer first.
Okay. And I believe you said that in your department you have attorneys, paralegals, and legal assistants, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that it is what grade levels are paralegals hired into?
Objection, relevance.
Okay, I'm going to skip that question. I'm sorry. So I'm going to ask you. Do you have people in your office, Mr. Goodson, that open the mail?
Objection, relevance.
It is relevant, Your Honor, because Mr. Goodson said that the section about the job description that says other duties, that the attorneys that are hired at the PDC who perform other duties includes any other duties that they can be assigned to. So I'm just trying to figure out what other duties that could be.
Well, I think your appeal has to do with data entry, Ms. Quimo, so I think let's stick with questions about data entry duties and not veer off into others. So the objection is sustained.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Judge. Mr. Goodson, would you not agree that a legal assistant, for example, will be more qualified, or somebody else like an administrator will be more qualified for a data entry task that will last over a month compared to an attorney that you hired in your accounts department?
No, I would not agree that they're more qualified.
Okay. Would you agree that by hiring an attorney in your department, you are hiring somebody that is able to think critically and apply legal reasoning to certain situations?
Yes.
And it is I believe you said that you were so busy, you've been so busy during this pandemic that you have over 2,000 people under your leadership. Do you believe that it's good management to use your attorneys for data entry tasks when apparently you have so many other tasks or other needs in your department? Meaning, do you believe that an attorney, attorneys data entry, attorneys using their skills for data entry, that's really fitting?
Well, first, data entry is involved in every position we have within the accounts department. Whether you're not an attorney or a paralegal or a loan closer, you're going to be, due to the nature of what we're doing, you're going to be inputting data through the computer, through the system that we use. Okay. So,
yes.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Mr. Goodson, would you be comfortable if a suggestion was made that you had to adjust or edit the work description for attorneys that you have now, the job description for attorneys that you have now on USA Jobs, to include, you might be required to do data entry, strictly data entry, simplistic data entry for over a month. Would you think that that's something that would be applicable to attorneys?
I can't say one way or another. We currently have the other duties as assigned listed in there.
Okay. Would you not agree that saying other duties as assigned after listing a number of challenging or thought-provoking task, would you not agree that other duties are assigned is a little misleading?
No, I wouldn't, because of the nature of our job. We have to do whatever it takes to get this job done.
Okay. My next question is, before somebody is promoted to a team lead position, is their work reviewed at all, or is their performance evaluated at all?
The supervisors.
Projection relevance.
Okay.
It is relevant.
Ms. Kramer, hold on. I'm going to overrule that, and you can answer. I would like to clarify your question, however, Ms. Quimo, are you asking if it's formally evaluated or if there's an informal evaluation?
I would like to ask if that person's performance is formally evaluated. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goodson, you may answer.
There's an informal evaluation by the supervisors who make their judgment as to the performance and whether the person has the requisite skill set to be moved into a team lead position.
Hold on one second. So before you move on, so Mr. Goodson, you emphasized informal evaluation. So are you saying that there's not necessarily a formal evaluation of that individual's performance?
I would have to, I would need a definition defining between formal and informal. I know there is an evaluation.
Yeah, by formal, I think I mean where the supervisor sits down with the performance plan and the employee and the supervisor both sign, like you typically do at the midpoint and the year conclusion of a fiscal year.
No, then there is no formal. This is done on an as-needed basis when we're building teams or changing supervisors around trying to get experience.
Mr. Goodson, when exactly is somebody's work evaluated after they are hired? At what point does their work get formally evaluated?
Well, you get a formal evaluation every quarter with a final evaluation at the end of the year on the formal basis, and then we have informal evaluations and supervisory evaluations done on a daily or weekly basis as you're developing as an employee.
Thank you, Mr. Goodson. Are any of the informal evaluations done by, I assume that the formal evaluations are always recorded, right?
Oh, yes.
What about the informal evaluations made by supervisors? Are they typically recorded in any way in writing, even if it's in an email or any type of file?
They may or may not be. It just depends on what they're dealing with a particular employee.
Okay. How many employees would be under a supervisor? Right now, I believe you said that you have 2,100 people working under you, and you have 8 plus 18. Okay, I'm bad at math. But how many people will a supervisor typically have under their leadership? Say during this pandemic, this is the 2020.
When we had hundreds, which is why we added the supervisors to try and get it down to the realm of about 60 per person.
Okay.
Thereabout. That's not an exact number, but the goal was to reduce the number of people assigned to each supervisor and take away the stress of having to manage that many people and keep the operations going.
And in order to manage that many people, would it not be expected or customary for supervisors to keep track of their employees' performance in writing instead of trying to keep it all in their minds?
It would depend on the workload and what we're trying to get done. So on a formal evaluation, yes, if there was something that needed to be addressed. But on an informal evaluation with the number of people that we're dealing with, there may or may not be something.
Okay. Okay. Will somebody, I'm going to go back to the formal evaluations. You said that they are performed every quarter. That is every 4 months, right?
What? No, you're going to get every 3 months.
Every 3 months. So does that mean that if I was hired at the end of March 2020, which I was, I should have gotten an evaluation 3 months later?
It would depend on what day you came in, because you have to be on board under standards for 90 days in order to qualify for a formal evaluation and sit down with a discussion. Okay. So it would depend on the date that you came on board.
I came on board. I was hired in late March 2020, and I started working at the PC on April 7th, 2020. But I never received a performance evaluation. After I left in August, mid-August 2020. So that's roughly 5 months.
I'm sorry. Counsel was testifying, and I apologize for interrupting if there was a question pending.
Okay. I think she was attempting to pose a question for that. So, Mr. Goodson, I think you understand where she was going. So if an employee started on April 7th, 2020 and left on August 15th, 2020, would that employee have, should that employee have been given a formal evaluation during that period?
They would have been given an offboarding rating possibly, or an exit interview, but they wouldn't have been given the quarterly review because the quarter ended at the end of March. Our year starts on October 1. And so they wouldn't have been under standards for 90 days when we did the next set of quarterly reviews.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow, Mr. Goodson. It's the end of the day, so could you unpack that for me one more time? So the quarter ended at the end of March, mm-hmm. and that employee would have had to be under standards for 90 days. Explain to me what that means again.
Yeah, they would have to have been on performance standards for the entirety of the next quarter to get a quarterly review at the end of that quarter. So April, May, June, the end of the quarter would have been, and so it would have ended in June. We would have done the reviews probably in July, but because that person hadn't been on standards for 90 days, we wouldn't have done that at that time.
Okay, so because that employee hadn't been on the standards as of April 1st, the beginning of that quarter, the employee wouldn't have been entitled to a rating for that full quarter. They would have waited for the next one. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And so then I wanted to circle back. You also said possibly an offboarding or an exit interview. Can you explain what you mean by those?
When we let people go, we try and have an exit interview. They're given an offboarding where they're given certain information and rules for the road on things they can and can't do when they leave the SBA. And then we also discuss their performance and what they would get. And that's typically what we do when we're letting them go. It just depends on the timing and when they leave and whether we're letting them go or they're resigning and what the time constraints are.
And the information that you provide about their performance, is that generally in writing or oral?
Yes, it's oral, but they usually get what is known as a blue card after they leave, which documents any issues that we had with their performance.
So would they only get a blue card if there was something negative?
No, they might get it either way. A lot of times the blue card is just a reference so that we know what they did when they were here, maybe what they're proficient in, so that the next time we go to hire, because we hire in cycles for disasters, we have some relevant information to begin with to see how they were the last time they were here.
Do employees who exit or who separate always get a blue card?
They're supposed to. Now I don't know whether they get it from personnel or whether I can't say the timing because of the number of employees we've had this disaster, because that's one of the things that we get backed up on.
Do you know whether in 2020 there was an issue with getting employees their blue cards?
I would guess if we had that many employees and we were still trying to hire a significant number of employees, you'd have to talk to personnel, but that might have been an issue.
Okay. All right, Ms. Quimo, you can continue.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Goodson, do you believe that who is responsible for giving anybody that leaves intentionally, basically anybody that resigns a rating or an exit interview or anything like that?
The supervisor.
Which supervisor? Because since they had so many supervisors.
Whichever supervisor you're currently assigned to at the time. Or if you had recently changed, they might use a supervisor that had you for more of the time than you currently had.
Would you be surprised? Would it be abnormal for you to hear that one of your supervisors did not provide any exit interview or for performance review or performance plan or anything like that?
What was the question again?
Would it sound abnormal to you to hear that one of your supervisors under your leadership did not respond to any of my requests for a performance plan, performance evaluation, or anything, or an exit interview, anything like that after I left?
I couldn't say because I don't know the specific details of if somebody left and they didn't give us enough time to prepare, that could happen. It would just depend on the circumstances of the exiting of the SBA.
After an employee resigns from the SBA, are they always handled? Meaning, are they allowed to continue to communicate with the PDC, with their supervisors at the PDC, or are they just referred to HR and they're not allowed to?
Once somebody is no longer employed with us, they're referred back to HR.
Okay. So the HR is the department where they will be seeking to obtain any type of exit interview, offboarding.
I think she froze.
I was going to say hello.
I think so.
Yeah, okay, we'll give her just a second and see if her connection reestablishes. All right, let's go off the record while Ms. Quimo works on her technical issues.
We are off the record at 4:34 p.m. We are back on the record at 4:37 p.m.
All right, Ms. Quimo has reestablished a connection. Before you move on to your next question, Ms. Quimo, I wanted to clarify a response from Mr. Goodson just a moment ago. Mr. Goodson, Ms. Quimo asked you if you would be surprised to hear about a supervisor who failed to provide an employee a performance plan or a blue card upon their separation. And in your response, you said if someone left and didn't give us enough time to prepare, it could depend. When you say didn't give us enough time to prepare, are you referring to the length of the notice the person gave prior to their separation?
Yes. In other words, I can't say whether I would be surprised or not based on not knowing the particular circumstances of the departure.
And so are you suggesting that the agency prepares those documents during the employee's notice period? So for example, if an employee gave 2 weeks notice of resignation, you would use those 2 weeks to prepare those documents?
Yes, we have to, if they give 2 weeks, we have to prepare an offboarding session and then get the supervisor notified that the person is leaving and that they're going to need to have an exit interview.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Quimo, you may continue.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Goodson, how long does the exit interview typically take?
It's not very long. It can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. It depends on the conversation and where it goes with the employee.
Okay. What does the exit interview consist of? Basically, what type of questions is the employee asked?
It's not, it's just, basically just, they're talking about performance, what they did while they were there, what kind of skill sets they had while they were there, what may or may not be documented upon the employee's departure, those types of things.
You said something, you said that the exit interview could take 5 minutes. Do you think that it is something that is feasible, that was feasible in 2020, in August 2020 by a supervisor? Doing a 5 minutes exit interview?
I don't know what length every exit interview went through during that period. Some may have been short, some may have been long, but I couldn't tell you based on, without going back and looking at everything. And I'm not the one who did the interview, so I couldn't tell you.
If you recall, did you have a lot of people resigning or leaving the agency in August 2020? I mean, your department, specific department.
I would have to go back and look. We've had a lot of people come and go throughout the entire period.
Okay. Do you require when you hire people for the disaster? Do you tell them that they need 2 weeks notice? Is that a requirement?
No, we do not.
Okay. Do they have to give? How long of a notice do they have to give before they leave?
There is no requirement on notice.
Okay. Could a blue card or a performance rating be provided to somebody that left the agency after the day that they left the agency?
It could be.
What information will a supervisor use to draft such documents?
Their experience with the employee, any production data that they might have, any input from other supervisors that may have supervised the employee.
And would that information be transmitted orally, meaning is this all based on their memory, or do they have some type of documentation that they look at when doing those types of reviews?
It could be either or both.
Okay. Is it customary for supervisors to make those exit interviews or fill out those blue cards just based on memory?
It's based on their experience and their, it could be their memory and it could be input from other people too. Okay. And when you say performance data, you also look at performance data. Would that
performance data be somewhere in writing or some type of document online or on paper? Or is the performance data also something that they might acquire orally?
It could be both.
And can you define what performance data that could be orally provided?
Their experience with somebody's production, how fast the person caught on to the program, how much help the person needed to get up to speed, and any actual documents we may have on production data.
Okay. Okay. I would like to ask you, if we look at number 10, tab number 10, page 99.
Is this the commitment plan?
Yes. Those are the emails that I exchanged with HR after I left the agency for the first time in 2018. And you can see that I requested a copy of my commitment plan, and I received it. And if you keep scrolling down on page 102, there's a rating. There's a rating that I received from Mr. Raymond. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown from Ray Brown, and if putting down, it explains the meanings of the level, the ratings, and then also on page 105 down, it speaks about the elements that are relevant to performance. To performance evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My question regarding this document is the email chains in the document is first of all, I would like to let you know that in 2017 and 2018, I was employed by the PDC in the accounts department as an attorney, specifically in the legal department, and I left 4 months later, and I received that. The document from Mr. Raymond, who was my last supervisor for I think a day or two before I left. And my question is, do you not find it unusual that after 4 months of work at the 4 months of work at the PDC in 2018, I was able to get a performance rating after resigning, the same day I resigned, because I remember I walked into Mr. Brown's office and I told him that I was resigning, and I asked him whether he needed some type of notice, and he told me no. So if he had needed some notice, I would have stayed 2 more weeks. But my question is, do you not find it unusual that back then I got a rating, and then this time around I wasn't even able to get an answer from my last supervisor for a whole year?
Objection, relevance, and compound.
Overruled. If you understand the question, Mr. Goodson, you may answer it.
I couldn't say one way or another. Obviously, she got a rating back in 2018. This is a final rating, a rating of record. So this is the end of the year review, or when she left. But circumstances in this last disaster were significantly different. We have not had this many people on board in this department, nor the other departments for this long, and dealt with a disaster of this size and scope ever. So I couldn't say that this was out of the ordinary.
I'm going to ask you, Mr. Goodson, whether we can go to number 37, tab number 37, page 25. And you can,
Okay. Is this an email?
yes. And if you scroll down, if you scroll down that page and then the next few pages, you will see conversations where you are CC'd regarding some award determinations and also a letter of counseling.
Okay.
Do you recall the context of those conversations?
The context of the conversations?
Yes. Do you recall what the conversations were about, how they started and how they ended?
What that led up to the AWOL?
What led up to the AWOL, the 4 AWOLs, and also what led to the discussions with HR regarding potentially terminating me?
Where are you talking about termination?
About termination? Okay. For example, if you go down to page 32, Mr. Chung says that he informed Felicia that we were holding on termination for now. Make sure that the employee, make sure we consider employee on performance. And I don't see you specifically mentioned in that email, but I believe you were mentioned in the emails below and the emails above. So you were included in that email chain. And my question was, what was your input regarding those conversations?
When Mr. Chung said that they were holding on termination?
Yes, the discussions surrounding termination. Were you aware of? I mean, you were on the email chain, so you were probably aware of those. But what was your input about that? What was the recommendation?
I didn't make the recommendation. I mean, there was discussion as to how much AWOL a person could get and whether or not that would lead to termination, but that's a generic discussion, not particular to this case.
And can I then ask you how many AWOL determinations can a person get before it justifies the termination in your department?
It varies depending on the level of AWOL and what went into it. There's not a set specific, but if we're giving AWOL, like in this case, it was just AWOL. It was not rising to the level of a termination.
Okay.
So, but if you have significant or repeated AWOL that hasn't been corrected, then it can lead to further action.
Okay. When you say significant or repeated AWOLs, all AWOLs potentially qualify as repeated and insignificant.
Pardon me, I didn't hear you.
Would an employee getting something like 4 AWOLs potentially generate a discussion about the termination?
It would depend on the length of the AWOL and how long. When you say 4 AWOLs, if it was 4 AWOLs for 15 minutes, we would address that. We might address that one way. If it's 4 AWOLs of 4 days each, we might address that a different way.
I was going to ask you, Mr. Goodson, I requested, I hope that you remember that, but I asked you, I appealed the 4 AWOL determinations that I received with you, and you denied my appeal. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember why you denied that appeal?
We could go back to the actual email, but the leave had not been pre-approved, and there was no leave for us to approve. It would have been, and you hadn't requested the leave. So I recall the circumstances. Yes. Are you asking specifically about why it was not overturned?
Yes, that was my question.
I consulted with Ms. Rivera and I consulted with Mr. Chung, and I didn't find sufficient evidence to overturn the charge.
What type of evidence would you have considered to be sufficient to overturn that charge?
I would have needed to see something that would have justified the leave, would have justified taking the leave without getting pre-approval and without following our guidelines, and I did not find anything of that.
You do remember that there were a couple of instances when I was 5 minutes and 15 minutes late after lunch on 2 separate occasions, and I got the AWOLs because of those absences too. So 2 of those 4 AWOLs were for being 5 minutes late after lunch, and then another one was for being 15 minutes late after lunch. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. What type of evidence would you have needed to be able to overturn those 2 AWOLs?
I would have needed to see something as to, well, I might not have even done that. At the time, it appeared that it was it wasn't being followed. The proper procedures weren't being followed. Now, if somebody didn't come back from lunch and let's say they called and they had been in an accident and were in the hospital, then we might look at that differently. But when we're seeing not returning from lunch on time on multiple times, and then we had the other incident in the morning, it appeared that there was an issue, and the appropriate way to address it was granting AWOL, because there was no leave that had been requested, and there was no way to grant it after the fact.
So is it your testimony that all requests for annual leave always have to be pre-approved?
No.
Do all requests for no? Okay.
They should be. They should be, but there can be varying circumstances.
Okay. Do managers or supervisors always have to have some type of documentation in order to justify absences to grant annual leave after the fact?
Some type of document. When you say documentation, you mean in writing?
Yes, I mean when I appealed the award determinations, I believe Mr. Shen, Mrs. Rivera, and Mr. Shen both asked me to submit documentation, and I had. And my question was, do you always request documentations before you review an annual leave request after the fact?
Did they request it for this or on an appeal? We would request that we requested documentation based on the appeal.
You request documentation based on an appeal. What does that mean? Does that mean
when you appeal the ruling of AWOL?
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry, Mr. Woods.
When you appealed the ruling of AWOL.
Okay. So before that, did I have to submit any documentation before I was given the AWOL determination?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't recall what Mr. Chung had you do or not do before his initial decision.
What I mean is, will a supervisor, a direct supervisor, would they be entitled to have some type of documentation before approving an annual leave request after the fact? After the event
would they be entitled, or would they have to have?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Would they have to have documentation?
It would depend upon the circumstances and what we were told, and what we were seeing. Okay. If we were seeing a pattern, it might be one thing. If we were seeing it was a one-off situation, it might be another thing.
Okay. When you made the determination about denying my appeal, were you aware that I was on the triage team? And I'm going to stop there and I'll let you respond first.
Was I aware of what?
Were you aware of my assignment at that time on the triage team?
In particular, to where when you were given AWOL?
Yes. During that time, did you ask what I was doing?
I don't recall. I can't. There may be a document, but I don't recall right now.
Okay.
That wasn't the focus.
Okay. And will somebody's past attendance be relevant when you review an appeal for AWOL?
Are you talking about whether they have attended all the time?
Yes. Basically, do you look at the?
It could be, but we also look at the current. We also look at the current situation and what the circumstances are.
Do you remember in my specific case whether you looked at my attendance records or my attendance history?
Well, I believe you brought it up in your appeal, but we were addressing the immediate circumstances. We were not addressing your history. We were addressing the circumstances of that week.
So are you saying that you basically made your determination, your denial based on my specific attendance for that specific time period, and you did not pay attention to any attendance records, past attendance records of the 3 or 4 months that I had been at the SPA?
No, I didn't say I didn't pay any attention to it. I said I focused on the performance, not performance, but the conduct that week that was at hand, and whether or not we had leave that was to be approved or not approved. We were under a strict guidance, strict leave policy at the time, especially when it comes to leave without pay. And so that was one of the factors that weighed into it.
Is there a reason why you made that determination for all 4 AWOL requests at one time and the same determination? Is that customary for you to combine or compile all leave requests into one?
It depends on the circumstances.
And so you believe that in my circumstance, that was justified. You just explain why.
I did not see any reason to overturn the decision to grant AWOL.
What type of reason would you have needed to overturn that determination? I'm not sure I asked you that before. Say, for example, for being 5 minutes late after lunch.
I believe I gave an example earlier. If something catastrophic happened, or I believe there was one morning you stated that there was an emergency, but did not give us any context of the emergency. And because there was no context, there was nothing for us to hang our hat on in terms of justifying the leave that was taken without following the proper procedures. And I believe I explained that in the my letter back to you. So, and when I determined that I wasn't going to overturn the original decision.
And was your refusal to overturn the AWOL determinations, was that meant to be to send a message, to send me a message?
What do you mean?
Was that meant to be some? Was that meant to? Because you said that you focused on the events that happened during that time period, meaning that you did not pay close attention to my attendance records since the pandemic began. Am I correct?
AWOL is just AWOL. It is leave that is not approved. And we were looking at the circumstances of the leave that you had taken that was not approved in the appropriate manner.
Okay. Mr. Goodson, you said that you've been at the SBA since you've been an attorney since 1992, but I don't remember how long have you been working at the SBA?
Since 1993.
1993, so right after you became an attorney. Since 1993, have you been late to work?
Objection relevant.
Sustained.
Okay. Mr. Goodson, are all annual leave requests that were not pre-approved, are they all submitted to management for review? Or as supervisors provided some type of leeway as to when to grant them or not?
They typically go to supervisors. And then if there is an issue, it gets raised up.
Does that mean that for my specific request to have been raised up to Mr. Sheng, that means that my supervisors identify my request as potentially being problematic?
Probably or possibly, yes.
Thank you. Is it Mr. Goodson, what is the policy about attorneys contacting employees when they are out on sick leave? How soon or how often can a supervisor contact an employee under their leadership? when they
It
are out.
depends. It just depends on the circumstances. I don't know exactly what you're asking.
Okay. Can we go to document number 23, please?
Thanks for being here.
Did you say 23, Ms. Quimo?
Yes, Judge. Document number 23, 23, and then page number 163. And then we can actually scroll down to page number 164.
Okay.
On page number 164, there's an email that I sent to Mr. Scott Montgomery at 4:50 a.m. Okay, so if you see that email and then you scroll up, I don't know if it's okay for me to ask you to quickly review the email chains going back up. I'm going to ask you, my question is going to be, whether it is PDC policy to repeatedly contact people that are out sick when, for instance, they are at the emergency room or they have some type of medical emergency.
So when did I'm seeing where you repeatedly contacted us.
Yes, if you scroll.
And I see where Mr. Montgomery responded back to you.
Okay.
That because it was going to be 3 days or more, we were going to require some kind of doctor's note, which is a normal policy with the PDC.
Okay. And if you scroll up, keep scrolling up at the top of on 163, you're going to see more exchanges.
When Miss Rivera said she hoped you were doing okay and wanted to make sure you were okay?
Yes, and then she said that she also needed to ask me some questions and that I should go ahead and text her.
Yes, I see that.
Okay. Do you see the time stamp at the top?
11:56 a.m.
Okay. And when you scroll down a little bit, the third email down, actually the next email is Mr. Scott Montgomery forwarding me an email from Mrs. Rivera saying that basically it was me saying that I would call Mrs. Rivera after I left the ER, and basically as you scroll up, you see Mrs. Rivera asked that I contact her because she has some questions to ask me. My question is, would you advise your attorneys, your supervising attorneys, to follow that procedure? And when somebody calls in sick and they say that they are at the ER, to contact them 3 or 4 times to try and obtain more information?
I don't see where Mr. Montgomery contacted you and then she texted you. Is that, or
Yes.
emailed you?
Yes.
I don't see anything other than I see him passing along the information and then her emailing you saying she hoped you're okay and she had some questions.
Yes,
and
after
said, text you whenever you had a moment.
Yes, and after that email, I did text her, and she asked me whether I had COVID. Was it a practice of yours in, say, April or June 2020 to contact people that were out sick to ask them whether they had COVID?
I couldn't tell you. I just know COVID was an extremely hot topic at that time. I don't know that there was a policy. I just know we had issues with COVID in the office. So if they were trying to make sure that if you had a COVID or had been exposed to COVID, they would need to make sure that you didn't come back in the office. And we found some way to let you telework or work from home.
Okay. Would you be surprised to hear that during that time I was actually have been working from home for a month, and there were no plans for me to go back to the office?
You're asking me if I would be surprised?
No, I mean, what I mean is, okay, I'm sorry about that. What I mean is, would that change your answer to my previous question, to know that I was actually already working remotely and had been for at least a month?
I couldn't tell you because I don't know the context between why Ms. Rivera contacted you.
Okay.
We report people that have COVID, whether they're in the office or not.
Would that information have waited one day?
Pardon me?
Could the office, the PDC office, knowing whether they had COVID or not, could that have waited one more day?
That's speculation. I don't know. I don't know why she called you. You're saying it was because she wanted to know about COVID, but that's not what I'm reading here.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just haven't pulled up the specific text messages that I exchanged with her. I could look them up, but that would take a little more time. I'm going to move on to sorry, I had one more question, but it's escaping me right now. Yes, I found it, sorry. Regarding post-employment, the post-employment notice that I received, if you go to document number 23,
okay.
and you go to page number 139.
Okay.
Does your office send this notice to all people that separate from the agency?
They're supposed to, yes.
Do they actually do that?
It comes out. It doesn't come from me. It comes from our personnel department. You'd have to ask them. But it's supposed to go with every packet.
Mrs. Do you know Mrs. Felicia Izabigi?
She works for the ODSEE department in the Office of Disaster Personnel.
She told us not long ago, earlier today actually, that the notice is sent by managers. Basically, it's managers, PDC managers, for instance, that would decide who gets this notice. Is that correct?
No, it's supposed to go with all offboarding packets from Department of Personnel.
Okay. Meaning that everybody that leaves the agency should get this.
Yes.
Whether they leave voluntarily or they were terminated.
Yes.
But it doesn't come from your department. It comes from the personnel department. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it's supposed to be included in their offboarding presentations and packets.
And as far as you know, every single employee that left the PDC from June 21, 2017 received one of these.
I couldn't tell you if they did or they didn't because we weren't the department sending it out.
Okay. And do you have any input at all, not you personally, but either you, any director at the PDC office, or any supervisor, manager? Does anybody have any input at all as far as this notice is concerned, as far as the dispatching or the distribution?
No, this is standard government statutes and regulations, and they apply to all government employees, depending on their circumstance, as outlined in the memo.
So, Mr. Goodson, would the terms of this memo apply to all employees, regardless whether they actually received the memo from the agency?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then all employees are given certain ethics training when they come on board, and we cover some of this stuff in the front end. It's with the 14 principles of ethical conduct on the presidential executive order.
I'm going to ask you, Mr. Goodson, do you believe that an employee that did not get this notice will be surprised to you to hear that an employee that did not get this notice went out about their business as if they were allowed to do whatever they could? Meaning, I'm sorry, I'm going to just ask you to scroll down a little bit to page 144. And where you see restrictions on recipients of and applicants of SBA assistance.
Okay.
Were you aware of this provision that restricted, that said basically a recipient of SBA assistance may not have a former SBA employee as its employee, partner, agent, attorney, or other representative for a period of 2 years from the date of the entity was granted such assistance? Were you aware of terms of these specific terms in this document or in general?
Yes, these are standard terms.
Okay. And do you when you hire people at the SBA, do you tell them about these post-employment restrictions?
We give them the standards of ethical conduct, ethics training, depends on how long they're on board. And then they get these. So if you had been on board with us before, you should have gotten one of these forms the previous time you were on board and left.
Do you mean that I should have gotten
this? Because this memo goes back to 2017.
Yes. Do you mean that I should have received this notice, or I should have been aware of the terms of this notice based on documentation that I will have received at the time of hiring?
No, not at the time of hiring, but at the time you left the previous time you were on board with SBA.
Okay, so there's no disclosure up front, but the disclosure, basically the SBA tells people about these employment restrictions when they leave. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And would it be surprising to you to hear that I did not receive this document the first time I left the agency in 2018? I couldn't say one way or another because I didn't do those. Okay. Does anybody at the SBA has access? Let me rephrase this question. The question this way: who has access to an employee's emails or phone calls or MS Teams chat? Does anybody at SBA at all within the entire SBA government, I'm going to say, has access to that information?
I believe are you talking about, you say emails?
Everything, when an employee is hired to work at the PDC, for instance, at any point during their employment, does anybody at the SBA has access to their emails or MS chats, any type of MS conversations or any content or
If somebody is included on the chat on Teams, I believe whoever is included on that has access to what you've posted on the chats. As far as emails, the agency, there is no expectation of privacy, but the agency, you have to go through the offices, the OCIO, to get access to anybody's emails. And that is not something we typically do.
What is the OCIO?
Office of Chief Information Officer.
What about phone calls? Are phone calls to emails to customers or phone calls to customers? Does anybody have access to them?
Phone calls are not recorded. However, the contents of discussions are transcribed in whatever system we may be using, whether it's DCMS 2.0 or the Rapid system.
And who has access to those transcriptions?
Whoever is working that file. It's not a word-for-word transcription of the file. It's a summary of the discussion that the case manager had with the borrower.
When you say whoever is working that file, do you mean that any team member, anybody, paralegal, anybody will have access to those?
It would depend on what system it is and who has access. It could be a team lead, it could be a supervisor. But yes, people working the file can go in and access that.
And
for
was
continuity. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please finish. I'm interested in knowing what you want to
For
say.
continuity of operations. So if somebody's out and somebody else has to work the file, they can pick up the file and figure out what's going on.
Okay. Was that process, was that system or that recording process in place in 2020, between April and August 2020?
It was for DCMS 2.0. It goes all the way back to when you worked for us, even in 2017. It was the same process.
I was never told that I could go somewhere and open something and access the transcript of the phone conversations.
As I said, it's not a transcript. It's a summary of conversations between borrowers and the case managers.
Okay, and I want to remind you, Ms. Quimo, that you're not testifying, so please just simple and direct questions to the witness.
And Mr. Goodson, I want to make sure I understand that the transcript or the summary of the conversation, is that entered by the person that had a conversation, or is that something that the system automatically records and enters?
It's by whoever had the conversation. It's their summary.
Okay. And if we go to if we go to back to the commitment plan, please, on tab 10. Page 99. And then you scroll down. I'm sorry, I meant to say page 103 is actually, that's what actually has what I'm looking for.
Okay.
I would like to ask you, so it says that at the end of the appraisal cycle, the employee's performance will be evaluated, and then the criteria for the evaluation of that employee's performance, number one is customer satisfaction, and it says delivers quality products and services to meet customer requirements and things like that. And then there's written material, drafts and produces. Basically, there's at least those three parameters, I guess I want to say, to grade or to evaluate somebody's performance. I mean, there's 4 and 5 also at the bottom. I want to ask you, Mr. Goodson, how would somebody's customer service or customer satisfaction be? How would you evaluate? How would you have a supervisor, for example, evaluate an employee's performance for customer satisfaction? What data or what information are they basing their rating on?
Objection from the agency. This is a multi-part objection. Relevance to that particular document in terms of time frame. Relevance is another objection based on the performance that's at issue here, which namely it is not at issue. And relevance also in terms of the document because it speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think, Ms. Cremo, I understand where you're going, and I think you're trying to find out if anybody monitors employees' communications with customers. I think you can just ask that directly.
Okay, Mr. Goodson, does anybody at the PDC or anybody at the SBA in general monitors or looks into an employee's communication with borrowers or applicants, whether it's on the phone or through emails or in any other way?
Yeah, they can go in and look in the file if they have reason to go look there. They can see what the person has been saying. We have a duty to make sure that we're communicating clearly, articulately, and appropriately with borrowers. So it's not something that anybody's listening in on your conversations, but if we got a report from a borrower about something inappropriate, we would have to go back and check that file.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question on what you just said, Mr. Goodson. Do supervisors or managers periodically check their subordinates' files to make sure that that the employee is performing to par?
They may. It depends on the circumstances.
Do you have any, were you aware of any discussions that I've had with customers when I was working at the PDC regarding any changes to loan requirements or qualification?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Did you have any? Were you aware of any conversations that I've had with Mr. Martin about a certain form 45 or 60 on August 2020, and which version of the form to use or not to use? Not me directly, but with my team lead and supervisors and.
No.
Will discussions about such discussions, would they typically be raised up to you, or would they be handled by supervisors themselves? Like basically, if somebody had made a disclosure to an applicant or to somebody, would you be informed? Would you be somebody that will be notified?
I don't understand the question. You're asking me.
Okay. Are you aware of the rules regarding loan qualifications for EIDL loans? Yeah, I know it's repetitive, but are you aware of the criteria for qualifications for EIDL loans for the COVID-19 pandemic?
Some, but not all, because I was not involved with the rapid. Once they built the new system, I wasn't involved with their requirements on the application process.
Okay. Do you believe that? Okay, you were not aware of that. Do you have any reason to believe that the requirements once the rapid system was built were different than the requirements for EIDL loans? Generally speaking?
I couldn't say. The requirements were being driven by the administration that was in charge at the time, and they were building the system to meet the needs of being able to get money out to millions and millions of people rather than just tens of thousands of people.
So if there was a rule change, for example, about eligibility regarding EIDL loans for the COVID-19 pandemic, you wouldn't have necessarily known about?
Or I could have been informed of it, but not paid. It didn't impact my department, so might not have paid that much attention to it. I couldn't say. But again, there were a lot of changes being made to the system, because we started off this disaster doing them in 2.0 and then totally changed to a brand new system.
Mr. Goodson, one more question, please. If we go to tab number 35, maybe it's not yes, I think it's 35, page 39. It's about the prime grant reviews.
Okay.
And if you scroll down, you're going to see some exchanges I had with Mr. Rossi, Craig, regarding me volunteering for that job, if I can say that. Are you aware of the do you know about the prime grants and the annual request for volunteers to assist them?
No, it's not part of our program.
Okay. Can I ask you, Mr. Goodson, whether whether somebody volunteering, one of your employees at the PDC volunteering to do other SBA work off the clock, would that be a reflection of good job performance, or would that be something that does not affect your evaluation of that person's work at the PDC at all?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. Mr. Goodson, are you aware of you have a reconsideration team in your office right now, don't you?
The application processing department does.
Oh, okay. So it's not in the accounts department, it's in the processing department, application processing department. Okay. Are you aware of what they do in reconsideration?
Not completely, because it's not our department. Okay. Generally they reevaluate the loan, is what I understand.
Okay. Are you aware of the types of trainings? Actually, I'm going to ask you this question first. Do you expect every employee at the PDC to read the SOP thoroughly?
Well, we ask them to read it. Do I expect it? Depends on the amount of time. The SOP is very lengthy.
Okay. When you say we ask them to read it, do you send out emails asking people to read them?
No, we just ask them as part of their training to review the pertinent sections of the SOP. We also include that in our training when we bring people on board.
And when you mean the pertinent sections of the SOP, do you mean the sections that are directly related to their job duties at the time?
Yes.
Or that they work on? Okay. Are you aware of the trainings available on the personnel page for your employees, the PDC employees? Basically, what I mean is there's an HR personnel page where you go in and there's like a whole bunch of trainings available. And sometimes when you get, when I got an assignment for
I think you're testifying again, Ms. Quimo. If there's a question, you can ask me.
Yes. So my question is, are you aware of the general, my first question is, are you aware of the general training bank or knowledge bank that is available to all PDC or OD employees?
Yes, people that have a talent management center access have access to, I believe, a variety of trainings.
Would you support or encourage people to complete some of those trainings or to read the SOP from time to time? I mean, beyond the sections that are directly related to their job assignments.
It depends on how busy we are at work and whether they're using work time to do that. And if it's directly related to what we're doing and it's assigned, yes. If it's not directly related, we ask that they do it at a different time or not do that. Do people have access to that SBA database off the blog of the SBA? They may. I don't know. I think they do. It depends on if you have access to TMC.
Okay. Mr. Goodson, are you aware of activities, of SBA activities that are not ODA, specifically ODA related or PDC related? Basically, are you aware of other SBA programs that are not specifically ODA related?
Objection vague and objection relevance.
Yeah, sustained. Just ask him something specific about what you want to know about, Ms. Quimo.
Okay. Mr. Goodson, Um, I'm so sorry. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to rephrase that question. I think I'm just gonna give it up. So I think that's it for me right now. I'm just gonna wait for.
Ms. Landry, did you have any cross for this witness?
Just briefly, Your Honor, please. Thank you. Mr. Goodson, good evening. How are you?
Oh, fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. Could you please briefly describe for us what the leave policy was in the Processing and Disbursement Center in approximately the summer of 2020?
We were under highly restrictive leave because we had the largest amount of work we'd ever had. We were not granting hardly any leave, no vacations, anything like that. We were very tight on appointments or anything because we were desperate to hire, and we were under the gun on production in all aspects, in all phases. So the word would be very tight.
And was pre-approval of leave required at all?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because we need to know whether the leave is absolutely necessary, or whether we can grant it. We were not supposed to be granting leave without pay in almost any case. So, we were trying to make sure they were very, very tight on us on watching leave.
And when you say they, who is that?
Our management, my supervisors, and the management at ODA headquarters. It was from, we were under the gun production-wise and hiring.
During the summer of 2020, were there mandatory overtime requirements in the Processing and Disbursement Center?
Yes, we've been, from then all the way to now, we've been working mandatory six days a week, 10 hours a day or more. In some cases, we've had to go to 12-hour days. But yes, it was a significant workload.
So if an employee took unscheduled leave, would the mandatory overtime be impacted at all?
Yes. If you take any leave and you get leave without pay, or you have to use annual leave, you are not eligible to work overtime, and it would create a situation where we don't just lose the leave of the employee. If let's say they take 2 hours of annual leave, we also lose their 2 hours of overtime for that day because they're not allowed to work overtime.
And turning to Ms. Cuomo specifically, you recall upholding Mr. Chung's AWOL determination for Ms. Cuomo as you testified, right?
Yes.
Why did you decide to uphold Mr. Chung's AWOL determination for Ms. Cuomo?
Ms. Cuomo's leave was not pre-approved, nor did she give us any reasoning that we found to be valid to overturn it. The one particular morning, she said she had an emergency, but would not give us any context at all as to why that leave had to be taken at that particular time. And without anything to hang our hat on, we had no choice. But because granting leave without pay would still be approving the leave, and we were not approving the leave.
You just testified about one instance where Ms. Cuomo claimed to have a personal emergency that prevented her from getting to work early, correct?
Yes.
Or on time, excuse me.
Yes.
If Ms. Cuomo had provided documentation that personal emergency was that she needed to apply for another job, would that have impacted your decision at all to sustain the AWOL charge?
That leave would not have been granted. That would not have been an appropriate use of leave during those overtime hours.
To your knowledge, was Ms. Cuomo aware of the policy on pre-approval of leave?
Yes.
And was Ms. Cuomo aware of the mandatory overtime requirement, to your knowledge?
Yes.
At the time that you sustained the AWOL charges against appellant, you did not have any knowledge of any of her disclosures regarding the economic injury disaster loans, did you?
No, I did not.
And at the time that you sustained the AWOL charges against appellant, you had no knowledge of any disclosures or communications by appellant regarding an IRS form 4506T, right?
No, I did not.
Did you retaliate against appellant at all by sustaining the AWOL charges against her?
No, I did not. AWOL is something that we take seriously. We evaluate it thoroughly, but it's just AWOL. It's just leave without authorization, and it can lead to something, but it doesn't always cause any immediate, formal discipline or anything like that. It's just AWOL.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Goodson.
All right, Ms. Cuomo, do you have any redirect?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Goodson, when you say that you were, to your belief, I was aware of the policy that restricted annual leave. What do you mean by that?
We had posted it in our monthly meetings on how tight leave was and that we weren't granting leave, and that everybody was under the understanding of what leave could be taken and that you couldn't work overtime if you took annual leave.
And when you say you posted it, what do you mean?
Those were in our monthly, some of our monthly meetings. Plus, it was covered by. Was informed that it was covered by our supervisors in their meetings with their staff. So.
Okay, when you say monthly meetings, you mean monthly management meetings?
No, monthly management, the accounts updates.
But is it your testimony?
It wasn't always monthly though, but we sent them out on a repetitive basis where we stressed the importance of leave and we were very tight on granting leave.
Okay. So it is your testimony that there was some type of notice that was sent to me in particular and as part as a group regarding leave that was restricted and that I received that notice before the events that occurred in July 2020. Is that correct?
I can't, depending on when you came on board, I can't say which notice you received or which notice you may not have received. But I believe that our supervisors had it was covered in our onboarding process, it was covered in our hiring process. At least we were told that it was, and it is part of our, because we even asked everybody if they have to take any time off, even when we hire them, because we let them know that leave is not we're very tight on leave and it was not an option. So.
Okay. You say that you had about 8 supervisors in your department during that time, right? Under your leadership. Can I ask whether whether you or your supervisors took any time off between April 2020 and August 2020?
Objection relevant.
Sustained.
If I may, your judge, the director just said that that annual leave was so restricted that it wasn't approved. So I'm trying to figure out whether it was the same thing for everyone. And so that's why I'm asking whether anybody under his direct leadership took that time off.
Okay, I sustain the objection, Ms. Cuomo, so you can move on to the next question.
Okay. Mr. Goodson, would annual leave request, the rules surrounding annual leave request, did they change during this disaster, or were they the same as before?
What do you mean, the rules about getting pre-approval?
The rules surrounding requesting annual leave, and for example, having leave approved after the fact. Did those rules change at all, or are they the same rules for every disaster?
No, the rules about trying to get leave approved prior to taking it have always been in place.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay. Would you be surprised to hear that during the Harvey disaster, when we were working overtime, I requested leave from my supervisor at the time, Mrs. Rivera, 3 times, twice for being 15 minutes or under late, returning from work.
Objection on the grounds of relevance. This has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Mr. Howlett's not your witness, so please mute yourself.
Apologies.
Ms. Climo, I apologize for that interruption, and Mr. Howlett shouldn't happen again. And you can repeat or finish your question, Ms. Climo.
Yes, Mr. Goodson, would you be surprised to hear that during the Harvey disaster in 2017, in late 2017 to 2018, when I worked in the legal department at the PDC under the leadership of Mrs. Rivera, that I was late after lunch twice while we were working overtime, once for roughly about five minutes, but I had to submit a leave slip for 15 minutes, another time for another 15 minutes, and another time for an hour. And then all those times, I was never asked, beyond stating that I was late, I was never asked to explain my absences or submit any documentation. Would that be surprising to hear that?
No, it wouldn't be
Excuse
surprising.
me. Objection, Your Honor, and I apologize for interrupting you, Ms. Climo. Objection based on relevance, and counsel is testifying.
All right, he just answered that no, it wouldn't be surprising to him, so that's already on the record. So, Ms. Climo, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Mr. Goodson, I'm so sorry, it's so late. Mr. Goodson, did you just tell us that the same rules that applied in 2017 under the Harvey disaster, the same leave, the same rules about requesting annual leave also applied during the COVID-19 disaster?
Yes.
And that the PD did not, okay. And during the Harvey disaster, do you remember how many hours we were required to work?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. I believe that I'm still asking questions for now.
Okay. So do you pass the witness, Ms. Climo?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Climo. Ms. Landry, did you have any recross?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Goodson, I do appreciate your testimony here this evening. I know it's going late, but it sounds like you're used to long hours. Please don't discuss your testimony with anyone who is not now present until this hearing is concluded, which will be sometime tomorrow. You are released and you may exit the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's go off the record.
We are off the record at 5:58 p.m.
All right, so